And there's a big gap in the middle of actually explaining AI for smart people, for a generally educated smart person, no expertise. That's what I've been trying to do. I started the newsletter, LinkedIn things called Decoding AI, to say to, a generally smart person, this is what it is. This is something about how it works. There's no equations. You're not going to be a technical expert. Particularly as a business person, at some point you're called on to say, yeah, are we going to make this investment or no? Are we going to take this risk or no? And I feel like with a lot of particularly the generative AI stuff, people are kind of blind. They're not used to being blind. So my goal is, if you can read this, you can ask some better questions.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Haresh Singhani. This is Conversations with Haresh. We'll be talking to people of varied backgrounds, covering various topics. I'm very excited to be able to share these with you. The goal is to increase curiosity and empathy amongst all of us to help us grow professionally and personally at all levels. And of course, we also want to make sure that this is fun. So thank you again, and we'll look forward to having you. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, nice to see you.
Good to see you. I know it's been a while since we got together last. I guess the pandemic disrupted everything, and there are probably a whole bunch of people we still haven't seen, at least not in person. Well, thank you for being available for this. As I was mentioning, we've been on this project, Conversations with Haresh, for, I guess, going on a better part of a year now. And we've invited interesting people over the last several months from different domains, some entrepreneurs, some technology experts, some experts in healthcare, and so on. And now I'm so excited to have somebody who's going to, give us a conversation about artificial intelligence, which kind of has come into the forefront of society, or our mind share, right? In the last, about a year, maybe a year. I don't know when it started.
I count it from basically last Christmas break. It's not when it's when everybody tried it out and went, holy cow, this is different and amazing. And I think everybody came back from that Christmas break, sort of January 2nd, and went, oh gosh, the world is different. You couldn't be a self-respecting IT director and, not have at least one POC ramping up by January 3rd, right? That just couldn't be. Everybody had to get something to be trying it out. So, and then that was, off to the races.
It's like a lot of things, including, the mRNA vaccines. Right? The pandemic kind of put that in the news and the limelight. But the work started decades ago.
Oh, absolutely. It's similar to the mRNA in that like almost every overnight sensation, right, was 20 years of work to get there. And this is no different. Many years of work, though I think it shocked everyone, just sort of the improvement has been accelerating instead of diminishing. And so I think everybody's been like, wow, this went really fast. There's a good story, and I won't repeat it because I don't know all the details, but Bill Gates saw, a GPT-2 and said, well, come back when it can pass the AP bio test. And under a year, they came back, and he went, oh, holy cow, you're right. That really is something. So,
Right. Yeah, he might have expected it to take years. So tell us a little bit about kind of your journey and what you're doing now, as well as how you got here. I had the privilege of meeting you probably now a better part of a decade ago in different lives, right, or a different life that you were leading at the time. So if you could get an idea of where you're at and how you got there.
I'm in a very, I'd call it serendipitous situation. I have had a long career doing marketing research. My education was survey sampling, that kind of research. I was doing that started out in advertising, kind of slid over into tech, and then wound up now kind of in the ground zero of what's going on. It's called AI Platform in Microsoft. So we're the group make the AI that goes into Microsoft's products, but also that makes it and sells it to third parties. And so for the last about 2 years has been managing the relationship with OpenAI. But I am not a technical person at all in that. My title is user research, but I'm not a traditional user researcher. I'm really looking at what do people want to buy? What will they want to buy? Are we making the right things that they will want to buy? And so that's, kind of how I got here with this front row seat in AI. I should say I spent a couple of years at Alexa working on that, running their customer satisfaction. So nothing to do with the AI, but an up-close seat at seeing how the AI goes into making a product, and particularly how it evolves so quickly. So did that, came to Microsoft, now doing this in a business-to-business framework, and it's been an amazing front row seat. And I find myself, both friends, colleagues, people are like, what is this really? Should I be afraid? And sort of, how does it work? And so having that conversation and even hearing people who ostensibly know about it, they don't even seem to really realize what's going on. And so I feel like there's a huge gap between, there's tons of popular press, hand wavy, all of that going on. And then there's, of course, massive academic things that are completely impenetrable to the layperson. And there's a big gap in the middle of actually explaining AI for smart people, for a generally educated smart person. No expertise. That's what I've been trying to do. I started the newsletter, LinkedIn things called Decoding AI, to say to, a generally smart person, this is what it is. This is something about how it works. There's no equations. You're not going to be a technical expert. Particularly as a business person, at some point you're called on to say, yeah, are we going to make this investment or no? Are we going to take this risk or no? And I feel like with a lot of particularly the generative AI stuff, people are kind of blind. They're not used to being blind. So my goal is, if you can read this, you can ask some better questions. You will be better positioned to say, is this an opportunity we want to go after? Is this a risk that we're willing to take? And to understand just the realities of what's involved in deploying this out there. That's the goal.
I see. So as part of your role, then you mentioned you're talking to external partners. Is it a large set of people, or is it a small set of very influential people, or is it a large set of just a lot of people?
Well, I interface on the inside with the people who are building the product, be that both developers and data scientists and product managers. But my job sort of is, I wind up interviewing a lot of customers and partners, being, the people that Microsoft uses to sell to the end customer. So it's working with them, talking with them, hearing what their concerns are, what they see the opportunity. So listening more than talking of what's going on. But then where I felt like I think I have something unique to contribute is just translating that into language that some business person could understand, who probably knows a little bit of the kind of traditional statistics. I think about people not unlike me, in B school. Yeah, you had that class, but how much do you really remember? Well, some of it. And over the years, as you've worked with market research data or whatever, something about sampling error, these are familiar terms, even if you're not really an expert on them. But I want to say, okay, well, we can use that as a basis, because that's been my basis for asking. And I've been very lucky. I've had some very smart people who will just sit there and let me ask question after question, like, is it like this? Is it like that over the other thing? And to say, okay, from this thing that I know, then how is it the same or different? Because there's ways, a lot of the foundation is the same, but there are important differences.
I have a car, but I don't know how it works. I don't need to know how it works, right? But it just works. I just need to know how to drive it and how to pay for it, of course. That's true for a lot of things. I was on an airplane a couple of days ago. I don't know how an airplane works. I think you get the question, right? The same thing. Electricity, I use it every day. I don't know how it's produced. I go to the doctor. They give me a COVID shot. I don't know how it works. But there are all these experts who take care of these things, and then I rely on them to do it for me. Even as an informed or a kind of a smart person, if one will grant me that, then do I have to bother knowing about AI, like the innards? Or what is that right level of awareness or knowledge that I need so that I'm not like unnecessarily learning something, right? But I'm not missing out on consequential nuances that are going to affect my life or society.
Let's take the car example. I don't know how cars work. And these days, almost nobody knows how cars work because they're really big computers with wheels. But we know a lot about what cars do. We know what the risks of cars are. We know where they go wrong. We know the Renton curves. We know they're dangerous. We know where the risks are with cars. We have a insurance system and safety belts and a well-developed system that understands the risks, understands the benefits. Also, there's lots of laws written about cars that all the bumpers have to be at the same height. So, when they do hit each other, we have airbags now. So it's a very well-developed ecosystem. There are experts who understand it, but even us lay users, we understand a lot about kind of how it works, not necessarily technically, but we know how it works in application. But with AI, a business person is saying, yeah, we're going to approve this, but they don't really know where the risks are, and they don't really understand that. And the truth is, even the most knowledgeable people in their organizations don't really understand a lot about it because it's brand new. It's closer to a car, 70 years ago, right? When it was a new thing, nobody kind of knew what it was. So at that point, you're sort of taking a flyer on it. Well, that's where we are now. And I'm not saying I think the risks aren't worthwhile, because I think they really are, and they are manageable. So I'm not one of those catastrophists at all. But I think that we do want to understand beyond the hand-wavy stage, but well short of the writing code stage. I mean, I will say the other thing is, I was sort of wanting to learn more about this. There's a whole bunch of places online where you can go. He says, I want to learn about machine learning. Great. Here's let's start coding in Python. Make Python write hello world. It's not really what I want, right? That's not the level of granularity. I want to understand it the same way that you and I understand how cars work, without knowing much about what's under the hood anymore.
Looking at your content, you're on this mission. You've given yourself this mission, it sounds like, largely, which is you're going to help the average, business leader, expert who is not from the AI domain get educated on what they should be thinking about, or how they should be thinking about, or at least how they could begin to learn about AI, right? It's probably there's no end yet in sight. So as you kind of started collating the content and the information outside of Microsoft and other people and places that you've been talking to, what are the themes that have emerged, and kind of a side question, surprises?
Well, one of the most amazing things has been the disconnect between the popular press, even the business press, and how AI is actually being used today. So if you read articles about GPT or ChatGPT, then you would think everyone was using it sort of like a fancy search engine, or maybe like a write my college paper thing, that kind of stuff, where you're using the information in the model. But that's actually the least useful way that actually businesses are using it. So what's really happening is they figured out and it's an architecture called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, which really just means you create an index of documents, important documents you have curated that are about some topic. Then you use the chat to go chat with that corpus. And you don't have it talk about the things that it learned in its training. Training a model on the internet is sort of like raising a toddler in a biker bar. The toddler will learn to talk, but you will not be happy with the vocabulary, right? But however people are actually using this stuff is, I create that corpus of information. Often it's proprietary to my business, things I know, right? And then I make the chat go talk to that corpus and only return answers from that corpus. So I think this is totally public now. If you're using the H&R Block online, do your taxes. Well, they have a big corpus of all kinds of tax information, right? Not just the laws, but actually written, what the implications are. You write a question, it searches against that, it comes back with an answer, right? There's a bunch of these out there now. And that's the main way that businesses are using GPT, generative AI, right? I never hear anybody talking about that. They always seem to be assuming that people are using the knowledge in the model, and they're not, right? You're really separating the fact that the model kind of knows how to talk, and doesn't know, but it appears to know how to talk, and then separate that from the fact that the knowledge it was trained on. Tell it to forget about the knowledge it was trained on and go to use only this very specific knowledge out there. That's the way companies are actually using it. And I don't think I have ever read or heard anything talking about that.
We're doing some work in this domain. Our teams are, right? And you're absolutely spot on. All the business users that we've talked to, this is what they're thinking about, or this is what they want us to do, or us to help them with. And we're helping them with especially RAG implementations, right? Basically tapping into their proprietary data stores or data corpus of data, et cetera, and then leveraging the LLM-based user interface, essentially. That may not sound very exciting if you're in the press or media, maybe. I don't know why it's not being talked about as much. That's like one of the gaps that might exist, and some of your communication might help fill that. other big themes or big pieces?
One of the hardest things to get your head around with AI is that it gets better in use. So if you're a business leader who's used to, green lighting an IT system, then you say, okay, guy, go make that system, go test that system. Now, is the system good? Is it ready to go? Okay, now we're going to release it. But in AI, you have to do the opposite, which is you make the system, you get it going, it's pretty terrible, but the way it gets better is lots of use. So you have to get lots of users using it and have a feedback mechanism hooked into it. That's how it gets better. So you have to put up with the fact that people are going to use something that's not very good. And either that's, you've got internal beta users, but you've got to put up with the fact that it won't be good at first. It will get good fast, but it has to be used to get better.
I guess that's probably okay in some applications. In some applications, it's probably a little too scary, right? Maybe in healthcare or cars for that matter, right? Things that involve life and death.
Right. I mean, in the healthcare situation, there's people who are doing this, but what they're doing is I'm going to make a suggestion to the clinician, and the clinician has to look and say, yes, that's right. No, that's wrong. The car thing, the reaction time is not such that that's really a viable thing. So that is why, the car thing is going slower than most of us thought. And ironically, the healthcare is going faster because the need is so incredibly great within healthcare. But yeah, you've got to have that fail-safe in there because you obviously can't put stuff out there that's going to be wrong without guardrails around it. One of the big things is most companies are used to owning their own software. At least they're used to owning their IP. I'll go buy, a PeopleSoft or whatever to do that thing that's that back office function, right? But whatever my IP is, whatever my product is, I want to own that. Particularly generative AI makes that impossible. Simply, you're not going to build your own version of GPT. It's not possible. It's out of scale. So it's forcing people to buy something that they're used to building and owning. That's a pretty kind of hard thing for folks to get over. Something that's core to our value proposition, but we're going to buy it and not control it.
Any thoughts on how this gets resolved or evolves? Because transparency, accountability, those things are extremely critical, right? In anything that is going to function well. Because if you don't have that, then you eventually end up in a big mess. How are businesses or societies, but businesses to feel comfortable with that?
Yeah, it's tricky because, on the one hand, it's sort of read the fine print. But if you say, this stuff is actually so incredibly complex that no one can fully know. If you can't know the details, know who you're doing business with, right? There used to be an old ad campaign. If you don't know jewelry, know your jeweler. How many of us actually really know anything about jewelry? We buy it a couple times in a lifetime, right? So know your jeweler. And I think it's the same thing here. Yeah, ask the questions, ask the hard questions, but ultimately you want to know who you're doing business with.
I think the problem here is that the jeweler, she or he doesn't know the jewelry either. I can know my jeweler, but now the jeweler doesn't know the jewelry. So now what the heck is going to happen?
It is a much more complicated system than a diamond, right? I mean, your first line, I think, and I don't want to sound like a shill for Microsoft here, but your first line is to be dealing with a company that both has the resources and the absolute incentive to keep your stuff private and safe, because that's your best defense. But then you want to be looking at it. And of course, all of our, the customers in regulated industries are going to have to.
But can they even assure me, like if it's Microsoft or pick any name, they can't assure me that my stuff's going to be safe, because it sounds like, and then this was true on some 60-minute interviews. I think in that particular case, it was Sundar from Google. And I forget the reporter's name, but he was asking that, do you know what this stuff is going to do? And he's like, no. Right? So now Google is just as good a name as Microsoft or pick any name. And if they're telling me they don't know what this is going to do, and I'm assuming if they don't know, I don't think anybody knows. So there's no other name that would know. So then what am I supposed to do? And I'm not expecting you to have an answer necessarily, right? Okay.
I'll tell you the way I think about it, which is how many things in life do you get with 100% guarantee? Because the person who sells you the car is going to tell you about the anti-lock brakes and the airbags and whatever. It does not mean it's 100% that you're not going to get hurt in that car, right? Or hurt somebody else. But we're all used to that.
Yeah, but you're able to trace things.
Well, the big thing is, I think this is a new field. It's emerging. The notion of the risk are different. But one of the things I look at with self-driving cars is people are holding self-driving cars up against perfect. But the competition isn't perfect. The competition is me. And me when I'm distracted, and me when I've had a glass of wine, right? Self-driving cars are not going to be perfect, but they're quickly going to be a lot better than most of us. But it's hard to accept that. We're asking for perfect.
But just like in cars and other things, there's a whole bunch of, and this is probably a different conversation, maybe another session. There are a lot of regulations in those domains. In this domain, there's no regulation as of now, or practically none.
Well, the Europeans are moving pretty fast, and there's a lot going on. And of course, you still have all of the laws that make it very much in a company's interest not to have things go poorly. And if you're a Microsoft or a Google, whatever, you're betting your business on doing the very best you can. So yeah, are there guarantees? No, they're not. But what I can guarantee is if organizations let this wait until there are no risks involved, they will have missed an enormous opportunity, including an opportunity to learn. Like again, because you can't just pull this thing off the shelf and make it work well in your application. You're going to have to be working with it. But, you want to be smart about what the risks are and where they are, and recognizing that everybody's learning together.
As you're working with the different parties, do you look at domain specifically what's happening in healthcare, real estate, transportation, shipping, publishing or banking, finance, etc.?
We have a lot of colleagues who focus on verticals, and they're looking a lot at the verticals. We're looking across them of what the next thing is going to be. We do tend to look at enterprises, what they're doing, particularly regulated industries, but then also looking at the startup world, the digital natives, seeing how people are using it.
I see. So are you seeing different things or more interesting things in certain domains or certain use cases?
Well, I would say one of the things that has amazed me is how fast some what we call ISVs have gone. So independent software vendors, right? It's a Microsoft term. And it covers everything from somebody who's making some app, some games in an app store to SAP or whatever, right? So it's a very broad term, but it has been amazing how fast ISVs, different software makers, have moved to get this incorporated into their products. And the contrast with how slow most enterprises have been, because you could really see the software vendors are recognizing this is opportunity. I have to be moving. I have to be getting the learning before the next and grabbing that. And even some what we think of as big conservative regulated industry ISVs are moving remarkably fast. But you have sort of analogous, the companies that they sell to and we sell to are like, we just have this little POC going, and the only people who can use that chatbot are actually people in IT. Like, we won't even release it in our company, right? So you're like, okay, got it. The corporations being very conservative, the ISVs moving, in my mind, remarkably fast, capturing that competitive advantage. So I do think that most businesses are going to get the advantages of this through the software they buy more than what they make. It's just been interesting to see that contrast.
I guess in some ways that's natural also, right? Because ISVs are building solutions that go to the entire world, whereas the enterprises are solving the problem for whatever their walls have, right, inside of their walls in some ways.
And it does get to that idea of scale, because all of this stuff is sort of, the first answer is very expensive and the second answer is quite cheap. Now, there are people who are worried about the cost of just using this stuff all the time because it does have big energy cost. But the economies of scale in all of this really do go to the notion of a few makers who are going to be serving lots of people. But, remember, enterprises do make lots of software in-house.
They do, of course, because there's a lot of custom requirements.
Right. But it's interesting how slow they're going compared to how fast the ISVs are moving.
And are there other domains outside of ISVs that are embracing it heavily? Or because sometimes in some domains, certain problems or certain requirements were impossible to tackle, and maybe AI makes them possible to tackle, so they might be using those AI solutions.
Well, part of the magic of ISVs is that they tend to be domain specific. So there are ISVs who sell to banking and ISVs who sell to manufacturing,
Sure.
right? They're moving fast and they're moving within that domain expertise, which again becomes, as Microsoft, we sell to everybody. They do that last mile for each of those verticals. And so it's been very interesting to see. Like I said, given the size of some of those ISVs are very big companies, they are moving amazingly fast. Because I think they recognize that it's opportunity, whereas the other companies are viewing it like cost savings.
Microsoft's an ISV.
Well, we don't think that way, but yeah. Part of the joke which we make is software development, particularly small-scale software development, is casino economics, right? Lots of people are going to make something. A very few of them are going to make money. But the house always makes money. So in many ways with this, we're the house. You're buying the base stuff from us. We're making it work for you. You're going to go out there, in Las Vegas, the house always makes money.
The ecosystem is evolving very, very rapidly, right? So nobody's position is assured into tomorrow. So you have to be constantly innovating and basically working with the assets you have, right? So at a scale such as Microsoft's, it has certain assets at its disposal, and smaller ISVs would have different type of assets at their disposal, kind of a thing. But the two extreme scales are clearly there.
Right. But if we're doing our job, the ISV has all of our assets available. We're making our assets available as fast as we can, making the assets that they need. So they're picking them up, and they're not hindered by their lack of scale. Because if they've got a great idea and they can incorporate it in their software in a meaningful way, we're putting it out there for them. And it's been remarkable. We've got one customer, they have no expertise. They've never even done machine learning. They were taking some online courses to try to figure a few things out. They've built an application. They've sold it to a bunch of big clients of theirs, and it's off and running. It's like, holy cow. And it's been basically done by one woman.
Looks like the amplification or the acceleration that platforms like yours can provide is tremendous, sounds like. So it could be an opportunity for the enterprises and the ISVs that are able to take advantage of that. Going back, I guess, to your effort in interpreting AI for the non-AI domain experts, how far are you into it? Do you have a time limit, or is this ongoing?
Sort of the end goal is maybe a book. Certainly the medium goal is a conversation with people. I've been putting these out there. A lot of people said, hey, I really like it. Well, that's great. Wonderful. I'd really like more feedback back, which is, that makes sense. That doesn't make sense. I want more of this. I don't get that. I'm trying to get that conversation going. So this is a wonderful opportunity for that. There's been some others that have come up. So I want to get that conversation going and seeing, what do people need to understand? What in what I'm saying makes sense, doesn't make sense, so that they can feel more knowledgeable about making the kinds of business decisions that a business person makes. Again, I'm not talking to the technical people because I'm not qualified to do that. But I got lots of friends and colleagues who do that, do that really well. But what should the business leader know? What I found in talking to some friends is you get this sense of unease. It's like, I don't know this stuff. I think I should know something about this. It seems really important, but I don't know it. And it's like, okay, well, let me try to help you come to the understanding that I have because I've gotten this front row seat at it. But, and it's not an equation-based understanding. You can't go in and code anything. I certainly can't. But just like we can drive cars, we have a real good understanding of how they work, even if we don't know literally how they work. So that's what, trying to do. One thing that's interesting about it is I tried pretty hard to come up with a way to not use the anthropomorphic terms. So it learns, it knows, it talks, right? Because it doesn't learn, it doesn't know anything, but it appears to, but it's really hard. You have to tie yourself in knots if you don't use those words. And so I finally said, okay, I'm going to use those words, but we all got to know the thing doesn't know. The thing doesn't think. It works. It does these things, and they're kind of impenetrable because the scale is so huge. They're very subtle, but it's not a person. This whole notion of, is it going to achieve sentience? I'm not worried about my lifetime. Maybe I'm naive, but I don't see any sign of sentience I think it's just like, I don't know, people throughout history have thought when they didn't understand something, they thought it was magic. Lightning was the gods are angry, what have you. People want to construct a way of understanding things. I think this thing is a long way from sentient. In the good and the bad. It means bad people programming it, it's going to do bad things. I will tell you the most immediate thing I'm afraid of with it is the deep fakes. We've seen our first, the first sort of big use of an audio deepfake with the Biden robocalls in New Hampshire. The Taylor Swift video pornography deepfake. I think there's going to be a lot of that, and that is very concerning. We're doing what we can, but there's a limit.
So how is the counter technology doing in terms of battling this?
I think not very well. The thing that strikes me, and this is not my area, so the thing that strikes me as useful on the video side is watermarking. Watermarking images is either real or manipulated. If you want to use those sort of products at Microsoft, you've got to tell them what your use case is. But there's other people out there who obviously will sell it to anybody, and then it's hard to police what somebody is doing with it. Everybody's going to have to get much more sophisticated. My mother once said, don't believe anything you read and only half of what you see. And I think she would be nodding her head at this whole situation now. It's going to get a lot worse.
I see. Are you doing anything personally to protect yourself and people around you, or it's not to that point yet?
Well, I'll tell anybody who will listen to get a password manager. That's not exactly AI. Well, I guess, phishing is an old form of AI. That's one of them. And I think we all have to be careful of what you put out on the web. But so this is actually an unusual and uncomfortable thing for me. I usually don't post anything much in social media, whatever. So doing this is a little uncomfortable. Putting the newsletter out there is a little more public than I'm used to being.
And that's only on LinkedIn, or is it on other platforms also?
It's on LinkedIn at this point. It might be interesting to put it elsewhere. I haven't heard anybody say they can't get to it on LinkedIn.
Do you keep a physical copy of all your data outside the cloud?
I don't keep a physical copy of anything. I have no files. People try to hand me files. I'm like, no.
Yeah, I don't mean paper copies. I should say, do you keep non-cloud copies of your data on any proprietary hardware?
No, I have everything on the cloud. There are really smart people. It's their job to make sure it's backed up. And I guess there's nothing that's all that so fabulous. And I guess maybe putting it on LinkedIn, that puts it in put this in a separate place. But yeah, no. If the Microsoft cloud goes down, we've got a really big problem.
Well, I mean, it's, you go to electronics store, they're selling a lot of backup disk drives still, right? Solid state, terabytes, multi-terabytes, etc. And some people are putting things on there. But it's not just for security reasons. People are probably using them. They're also using them for portability and so on. But I guess it's a good reminder. There was a professor at Caltech who was trying to summarize kind of how AI, what are the opportunities and issues with AI, right? And opportunities obviously are clearly there. There are a lot of, we don't even know the set of problems that are impossible today that will become possible to solve with the technology, right? And the professor was saying that basically the other two bad scenarios, which is bad humans doing bad things using really powerful tools. Well, that one that's a problem that's existed for a long time, and tools have gotten faster and more dangerous, and so that'll have to get sorted. One suggestion he was providing was to make AI as an, I think, aggravation or so if you do a bad deed without AI, then say there are certain penalties for stealing or harming people or whatever. But if you did it with the aid of AI, it'd be like robbery versus armed robbery. Then you would punish the person more if they used AI to do something bad. But anyway, that was just one suggestion he had. But ultimately, we have to figure out how to punish the humans who do bad things using super powerful tools, or to in the first place to prevent people from being able to do it. And then the third piece is something you alluded to earlier that he said he wasn't too worried about, which is runaway AI, right? Sentient AI having its own motivations or its own goals. This particular expert wasn't worried about that. So basically, the scariest scenario he was seeing was, what can bad humans do using extremely powerful tools?
Some really smart people have said they're not worried about it, and I tend to believe them, and I don't see it. I don't see anything that makes me think that it's more likely than that. I just think a bad person with bad tools is, okay, Kim Jong-un, right? Bad person, yeah. Bad tools, yeah. Powerful tools, Bad person, powerful tools. And anything about, whatever we could do in this country, it does become a little silly because the person who's going to rob your bank account is extremely unlikely to be in this jurisdiction. They could be anywhere in the world, right? So the idea that they're going to be brought to trial in the same jurisdiction where you are, really unlikely. We're going to have to be smart about our defense because there will always be bad people out there doing creative things.
I've probably exhausted some of the thoughts I had when we were planning this conversation, but happy to get any parting thoughts or summary that you might have to offer and what we should look forward to in the newsletter.
Next edition, and I've got to get to it, is some thoughts on how I think it's going to change work. Because, most original automation took away a lot of lower level jobs. This is really impacting some higher level jobs. In many ways, the higher you go up, the more benefit it can have. And I think those workers will see it as benefit much more than displacement because it takes away the things that irritate them in their jobs. But it is interesting, what we've got right now is a lot of stuff that's good with words, right? It has yet to be very good with data, numbers, right? And it's really not all that good with physical objects. But as that progression happens, it will be interesting to see how it changes work. But I am convinced it's changing work.
Awesome. Okay. We should have mentioned this. I should have mentioned this at the beginning of the conversation. The official name is Decoding AI.
What every leader needs to know about AI. Decoding AI, what every leader needs to know about AI. Yeah. That's the thing. And welcome feedback and thoughts.
Right. And it's Lynne Thomson without a P.
Correct. That's the tricky one. And I should definitely say, these are my thoughts. This is not an official Microsoft thing at all. I'm not giving away any of their secrets. This is just what I think. And
sure, it's a personal endeavor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, Lynne, thank you very much. It's most wonderful to understand some additional context and motivations. It looks like an exciting place to be. Lots of opportunities for businesses and society to leverage the new set of tools and hopefully not be scared by it.
Maybe appropriately cautious. Let's go with that.
Exactly. Well, good to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thanks.